In this video we will continue looking at Carlsen's positional games in which he slowly but surely outplays his opponents without giving them any way to obtain active counterplay. And you will see some similarities in these games that we will see with those from the previous video. But the difference here is that Carlsen's opponents do have some active options and they're trying to do something, but nevertheless they just get positionally outplayed in many different ways. And the first game that we will see here is Carlsen's win over Hikaru Nakamura in 2013 Tata Steel, where Carlsen again had white pieces. Now, we will see a lot of games where Carlsen had white. Obviously, it's easier to outplay your opponent positionally if you're white, but I will try to mix it up a little bit later, and we will see some of Carlsen's wins with black pieces as well. So, in this game, Carlsen opened with e4, and Nakamura, who is a very active player, he responded with the Sicilian, and he played this Sicilian with e5, which is very similar to the Sveshnikov Sicilian, but black is postponing development of his knight, so the knight doesn't go to f6, sometimes it will go to e7, so it avoids this spin with bishop g5. And this is kind of a rare opening on the high level, but it's quite playable. Now, immediately we notice that there is this d5 square, which can be used as an outpost and also backward d-pawn. But black tries to get some active counterplay there. And normally white plays either c4 to make sure he controls d5 square with his pawn as well. Or the other common move is knight c3, very similar again to the Sveshnikov Sicilian. But here Carlsen played a rare move, g3. This is, I think, the first time I'm seeing this on a high level. And the idea is just to develop the bishop to g2, which just by extension controls the d5 square, so it's really difficult at any point for black to push his d-pawn forward. And here, of course, black can do a lot of things to develop. He can first play a6 and then develop his knight to f6. Maybe bishop e7, bishop g5 is sometimes an idea for black, and so on. Also, f5 is a possibility, but in that case, we exchange on f5 and the bishop on g2 is actually quite useful because the long diagonal opens up. So, all in all, g3 is a very interesting move, and here Nakamura decided to counter with h5. And that's a fairly typical Sicilian move, where he's sometimes trying to play this move h4 to shake up white's kingside, and if white plays h3, then the f4 square will be weak, and if he plays h4, then g4 square will be weak. And because of that, Carlsen just didn't react at all. He played knight c3. Knight d5, of course, is a threat, so black needs to play this move to kick the knight back. And now, typically, black plays b5 to isolate the knight on a3. Now, this is all very normal, and we have seen similar maneuvers before. Knight d5, knight e7. As we said, we don't put the knight on f6 to avoid this bishop g5 pin. And the opening, the first 10 moves of the opening have finished. But still, there are several options for both sides. And here Nakamura didn't make an exchange on d5, which is normally what black do in these positions. But he played bishop g4. And this is an interesting move. We will get back to it, but let's just see what happens if black takes. So what does he accomplish with this move? Well, normally white would, of course, take with the pawn. And what happens then is that this pawn on d5, while being strong, it also blocks this d6 pawn, so it's not, d6 is not such a big weakness, because it cannot be attacked on the d file. And normally what white do after that is they play c4, attacking the b5 pawn, and in case of the exchange, the knight comes to c4, and it's very useful there. And in case that black at some point pushes b4, then the knight can come to c2. Okay, in this position it's not possible because b4, queen a4. But anyway, the knight now has some ways to join the game, and these positions are quite complex because black will also activate his knight with knight f5, knight d4, bishop e7. I believe that such positions have been played a lot in the World Championship match Carlsen-Caruana, with Carlsen having black pieces. And so this would be an interesting position, and I think that Carlsen said after the game that he expected Nakamura to play something like that. But Nakamura played this move bishop g4. And it's a provocative move because he wants to see how white will react, whether he will move his queen or play f3. And Carlsen played the move f3. Now this weakens this diagonal, this dark square diagonal, and also it blocks this g2 bishop. So queen d3 was a good alternative, just to avoid that. But we have to trust the world champion on his positional judgment, and obviously he didn't mind temporarily closing down his bishop. Now bishop e6 is the move that I don't really like. So this retreat maybe is not accurate, because after that black can never really take on d5 with the knight. Nakamura obviously wanted to take with the bishop, but that weakens the light squares. So I think that it was better just to play bishop d7, keeping the option of exchanging on d5 with the knight. And this would lead to, again, to those positions that we have already seen just a while ago. So bishop e6 may be the first inaccuracy, not a big one. And c3, again, a normal maneuver, knight c2, knight e3, sometimes knight goes to b4. So this is all pretty standard stuff. Now h4, this was expected. And I think a lot of people here would get scared about this h4, and maybe they would have played with their h-pawn earlier. But Carlsen just ignores it, and he continues with his centralization plan. And this is what you see a lot in his games. He just has a certain positional setup that he goes for, and sometimes if he thinks that his opponent's counterplay is superficial, he just ignores it. And here I think we have the same case, because here black can do two things. He can either take on g3 or he can push the pawn to h3. Now, if he, let's say he takes here on g3, and we get this kind of position, okay, white cannot castle anymore, but neither can black, and it seems like white has an edge here, because he controls this central square and black does not control d4, and he can attack the queen side with a4 later. So white should have definitely an edge. In that case, in case of h3, bishop just goes to f1, and it's not, black did not do too much with this whole h-pawn idea. So white can just continue developing. And Nakamura decided to not to do anything with his h-pawn right now, to keep it more flexible, but he made this exchange on d5. And as I said, I don't like this so much. I mean, in the Najdorf we often see this exchange, but this is a little bit different. Here the light squares are quite weak. So there is this maneuver knight b4, knight c6 at some point, and also other light squares could become weak later. And I like Carlsen's next move. He really makes a point about the light squares by playing f4. And the idea is just to take on e5 and push d6 and open up his light square bishop. So here it seemed only natural for black to make the exchange on f4. So for example, first he can take, exchange everything and take on f4. And I think this position would not be so bad for him, because his knights will have some decent outposts. Like if he plays knight c4 and knight e5, this is one of the most important things if you have knights against bishops, to get good outposts for your knights. And this would have been a good plan for black, I think. His bishop will come to e7 and his king will not be that exposed. And also white king is just a little bit, it's a little bit unclear where it will go. Maybe it will go castle queenside, maybe it will stay somewhere on f1. But definitely it's not such a clear position. White is better, but not by too much. However, Nakamura didn't do this. He didn't take on f4, but he played this move knight f5. And the knight feels a bit loose here on f5. And it's not... okay, it attacks the g3 pawn, but it's not clear what happens after g4. Well, Nakamura foresaw this, and he played... This was his idea, to play h3 and to open up the h4 square with the temple. However, Carlsen just didn't really think much of that, and he allowed h3 as well. And after bishop e4, now his bishop is well centralized, and black has to decide what to do with his knight. There are two things he can do. He can go knight h4, as he did in the game, or he can give a check, but king is safe. There are no mating patterns here. And now the knight has to either retreat to e7 or something like h6, but that doesn't really look very good for black. His pieces are uncoordinated, and white controls the center, so it should be better, clearly better for white. However, Nakamura decided to play knight h4, and now we see that both black knights are on the ring, which is usually not a good sign, and also none of his other pieces are developed, which right now it's still okay for him, but we will see that over a few moves he will really get into a difficult position. And here Carlsen really wasn't too bothered with this pawn and the knight on h5, and he just castled, because he feels that the king will be safe there on g1 or h1. There are no black pieces that can attack it, and actually he's the one that could start an attack. Now f takes e5 is a real threat. The f file opens up, and after d6 also the diagonal can open up. And here, a bit strangely, after g6, which Nakamura played, he didn't take on e5. But this might have been the best move. And after taking, now the bishop opens up, but we can block it and we can open our own bishop with d6. Then the queen can come to d5 and knight to b4. This looks really, really good to me. So it's a bit surprising that Carlsen didn't do that. But he just continued just patiently, and king h1 is not a bad move at all. Maybe it's not the best, but it definitely doesn't make his position worse. So this is one other thing about Carlsen's positional handling, is that he rarely makes moves that make his position worse. Sometimes he will miscalculate something or make a blunder, rarely, but really I don't recall cases where he made big positional mistakes. And king h1 is just a useful move to get the king out of this dark square diagonal. And he was really not concerned about f5, because after black pushes his pawns forward, he creates weaknesses behind. You see, with the f5 move, he's created weakness on e6, and with the e4 move, he allowed white to get his knight to d4, and after that the knight is just jumping all over the place with a lot of threats on these weakened light squares. So Nakamura decided against f5, and he played bishop g7, and now Carlsen took the opportunity to shut off black pieces with the move f5. So now the knight on h4 doesn't have any squares besides g2, but this is quite useless. The bishop on g7 is shut down, and white just controls the center, and his plan is very simple. After I have removed all counterplay from my opponent, I'm going to focus on the part of the board where I have the advantage. And this is clearly the queen side. So white has the more pawns on the queen side, and also black pawns are exposed, as they usually are in these types of positions. So we can target them with a4, and then we can go knight b4, and again attack all these weak light squares in black's position. And after this exchange, black should have, of course, blocked this pawn first, close the position a little bit, and maybe try to organize counterplay along the g file. At some point, maybe try to exchange the dark square bishops with bishop g5. But Nakamura played a really strange move here, knight g2. I don't think that he was seriously considering white to take on g2, because that would open up the h file. So I'm not really sure what the idea was, maybe just to open up the h4 square for his queen. Nevertheless, he blundered a fairly simple tactical shot, where after f6 he cannot take this pawn. This is the problem. He takes queen f3. Now f7 will be checkmate, so he has to play rook h4 to counter attack. And now maybe the move that he has blundered is bishop g5. When his position just falls apart, I'm threatening bishop takes f6, and black has no defense. But this happens when you have a positionally sound setup like Carlsen has in this game. Your pieces are coordinated, communicating with each other, not like in black's position when every single of his piece is disconnected from each other. So this is basically the winning move from a strategical standpoint, because now black's position just strategically it's untenable. But let's see how Carlsen finished black off. So the pawn cannot be taken, the bishop has to retreat. I mean, bishop h6 is also not possible because of queen h5. And then if you go bishop g7, I'm just going to take that bishop and promote on g8. And so bishop f8. And now let's see how Carlsen finishes him off. So first queen f3. Then knight goes to b4, threatening to go to c6. There's not too much that black can do here. He's just making some moves. Now after the move knight c6, the problem for black is also that he cannot castle legally, which means that his king will stay in the center. And now Carlsen just focuses on checkmating the king. So first he plays bishop f5, avoids the trade. And you can see how this knight on g2 is just doing nothing there. Maybe it was better to play knight h4 to just trade this bishop. But he played knight d7, attacking the pawn on f6. And then Carlsen plays bishop g5. And this is that steamroller that I was talking about. Just look how white has pushed all black pieces to the last two ranks. Besides this desperado on g2, but we don't really count it. It's just really a sad position for black. And let's see the final combination. So queen h5, he wants to go bishop e6 with checkmate. And then after knight b6, he played bishop e6 nevertheless. And after Nakamura took on g5, here he had to resign. Because in case of queen c6, we have a beautiful checkmate with the pawn f7. So, a very nice game by Carlsen. Obviously some positional mistakes by Nakamura, but this is what happens when you play against a strong player. And you're always, on every single move, you're facing a difficult decision. It's very easy to make a positional mistake. Now, as I promised, let's take a look at one game where Carlsen was actually black. So, in this one, he played against Argentinian Grandmaster Diego Flores. This was also played in the Olympiad, although in 2010 in Khanty-Mansiysk. And Carlsen was very young then. He was only 20 years old, but he was already rated 28-26, and the highest rated player in the world. His opponent is a good grandmaster, the firstborn of the Argentinian Olympic team, rated around 2600. And let's see how he outplayed him positionally with black without giving him any chance. So they played the symmetrical English, and this opening is not very dangerous for black, from at least from the theoretical standpoint. And here he played this system. Of course, there are many systems for black here, like knight f6, e6, e5, but he played this one with knight h6. The idea here is to keep the bishop open, so not to obstruct the bishop with knight f6, and then the knight later will come to f5 square, making it more difficult for white to push d4. Here white played b3. I'm not sure if this is the best way to handle this position. As far as I know, white usually go for rook b1, a3, and b4 in this symmetrical English, but let's see what happened here. b3, castles, bishop b2. Okay, and now, since white hasn't done that, black will use this queenside expansion plan with a6 and b5. Now after e3, threatening d4, Carlsen simply prevents this. And now white is sort of confined to some maneuvering play where he doesn't really have any edge. And I don't think that's such a good strategy against a 2800 player. But let's see. Queen e2 was played. Now, white really cannot... I mean, he could play the move a4 to stop b5, but this creates too many weaknesses, like b4 square and backward b3 pawn. So queen e2, and after b5, I don't think that black is already facing any problems in the opening. So he has a nice position. And here white decided to trade the dark square bishops. Probably not a bad idea, but maybe he should have played some rook move before that. But let's see. He played knight d5, and then after e6 we get the trade of bishops, and the knight has to retreat. And here, this is the first important moment of the game. Well, how to continue here? Carlsen played the move that gains space. Played b4. So he gives up on some ideas to maybe open up the b file at some point by exchanging on c4, but he rather takes up some space and pushes the knight away from a good square. c3 is a good square for the knight, and the question for him is where to go. If he puts the knight on the rim, it's really not good there, and bishop d7 eventually will just chase it away to b2. So that's not a good choice for white. He went to the center, to e4, but this just gave Carlsen an opportunity to gain even more space with the tempo. And you can see now that in this symmetrical position, it is actually black who has extra space, spatial advantage. And now also the question for white is, can he strike back? Can he put one of his pawns in the center? Now obviously d4 is not possible. e4 is possible, but it will create a weakness, a big weakness on d4. So the only reasonable way, and a fairly standard way to strike back in such positions, is to push f4. And white had a way to do that, which he didn't play, but the best move here would have been knight g5, using this small tactic that the bishop or the knight on c6 is undefended. So once we defend the knight, or we move it away, then white can play f4, putting his foot in the center. And this would still remain a relatively balanced position. However, white played a3, and this is really the first unforced positional error. Of course, he would like to open up the a file for his rook, but what he didn't consider is that he's also giving black some advantages. So he's giving him the outpost on b4, and also from there we can attack the pawn on d3, and the b3 pawn becomes a backward pawn. So it seems like from this exchange it is black who has gained more than white, because this a6 pawn, in theory, it is a weak one, but if I have a knight on b4 and I can defend it also with my bishop, then there should be no problem with that. So we can already say that black has a slight positional advantage. Now bishop b7, it's a normal move. We would like to trade this bishop because it was not very active on c8. And at the same time we are weakening, or at least we're removing the defender from the king side. So white king will be slightly weakened compared to the when he has the bishop on g2. Now Carlsen notices that with this move knight e1, actually white also prepared the maneuver to c2 to trade for the strong b4 knight. And this is why he made the prophylactic move. This is what we call overprotection from Nimzovich's my system, which means that we are anticipating our opponent's plans and we are protecting our weaknesses. And so a6 is a weakness and we are anticipating knight c2. So after that, he gave what I like to call an informative check, just to see how white will react. And actually white reacts not in the optimal way. He plays the move f3. And this move just weakens more pawns. I don't think it was necessary at all to play like this. It was simpler to just go king g1 and then later see what to do. But he played f3, and now e3 pawn is weak as well. And the question is what to do. How should black continue? Should he trade the knights or not? And of course, Carlsen gives us the right answer. It is to keep the knights. So don't trade your opponent's more passive piece for your active piece. Retreating the knight on c6, there's no shame in that, because the knight will be useful still on c6. Much more useful than the knight on c2 anyway. Now, after several just normal maneuvering moves, we can see how black's spatial advantage is giving him more options than white. White is more passive, and he doesn't have any active breaks in the center, as we can see, while black maybe has this plan of pushing his g-pawn, g5 and then f4, and trying to open up some files on the king side, where he can maybe have the rook king h8 and rook g8 try to attack as well. So definitely not an easy position for white. He has a lot of options, but it's not really easy to find something very promising for him. He decided to play f4, and I mentioned before that this is the standard way of responding in the center. So this looks okay, but it comes a bit late, because now already Carlsen has some strong ideas. So he exchanges on f4. White cannot take back with the e-pawn, because then black gets an outpost on d4. Has take with the g-pawn. Now e3 pawn is backward, and sometimes this can be a problem for white. But actually the real problem in his position is actually shown by Carlsen's next move. And this is the key move of the game, I would say, because he pinpoints white's weakness. He played the move queen g7. And the point here is that both b2 and c3 are very comfortable squares for the queen, from where it can attack these weaknesses on d3 and b3. And then also white knights are very clumsy in that situation, because they're in each other's way. And it's just a really uncomfortable move to meet over the board, because you have many options with white, but what is the best way to deal with this? Here white played the move rook a1, and then Carlsen first played this useful move rook e8, because we saw that knight d4 is a threat, followed by the attack on e3 and b3. And so here white finally made a mistake, a serious one. this is the move rook a2. So he's just kind of losing the track of the game. He already played with this rook once on the previous move, and now he's playing with it again. He should have played, but this is not an easy idea to see, queen f2. It's actually counterintuitive because now it seems like there's no way to protect the d3 pawn, but actually this is the point. Very nice move, rook c1, and this d3 pawn cannot be taken. This is the tactical idea that white has here. The queen will be trapped, which is why we needed the rook on c1. However, this is a difficult idea to see in advance, and I'm not surprised that white didn't find it. Instead he played rook a2, and now the queen has this really nice square on c3 to harass white. The knights can hardly move. Okay, white played knight d1, which is an ugly move to make, but maybe it has to be made because otherwise there's not, knight d4 would be coming anyway. Now, using that the knight is not on c2 anymore, Carlsen played knight b4, attacking the rook, and now this was white's idea to chase away the queen from c3. The queen is coming back, but this is the problem. Once the rook moves, look at what white had to do to chase away black queen. He had to put his knights on the first rank, where they are very passive. And here Carlsen uses this exact moment to open up the game. So this is another very useful positional tip. If you see that your opponent is uncoordinated or he's fallen behind in development, open up the game, because he will not be ready to mobilize his forces while you have the initiative. And this is why Carlsen played the move d5. Now d4 is a threat, and the pawn should be taken. If white plays some move like queen d2, then we play d4, we undermine this pawn chain, and then in case of e4 we have a really strong move, g5. And here basically white's position just falls apart. Again, because his pieces, his knights are completely useless. If his knights were somewhere on f3 and, I don't know, g3, that would be a different story. But as they are, white is just without any defense. So he had to take, and now the knights, black knights are centralized. Knight d4 and knight f4 are both threats. So white defended against knight f4 threat, but now this tactical shot wins the pawn. We can see that e3 and b3 are targets, but white has no queen move to cover both weaknesses. If he goes queen a2 to protect b3, he's going to lose the e pawn. So he decided to give up the b pawn. Okay, now white already has a material advantage in addition to his positional advantage. So this should be winning without much trouble, but you never know. The game can be lost even if you are winning if you're not careful. So let's see how Carlsen converts his advantage. Queen a2, this looks like a tricky move because we have this sort of X-ray attack on the g8, on the king on g8. And here Carlsen finds the best move, queen b7, protects both knights, and also there's no really useful move for white. He cannot move his knight. If he goes knight d2, we have, or we can just take the knight and continue rook b2. He cannot move his rook on a3, and also e3 is hanging. So he played queen c2. He just didn't even bother defending the e3 pawn. And let's see what was his idea. Knight c3. Okay, but now he's 2 pawns down, and this is just mopping up time for Carlsen. Queen d5. Take the third pawn. Why not? Check. The king will be safe on h6, because white doesn't have any pieces to attack the king. And actually it is black who is going to checkmate now, after rook b2. So, to me, this game also felt like White was trying something, but he just couldn't deal with the just supreme positional mastery of Carlsen. Hopefully, these two games were also useful for you to get some extra positional ideas. And we will continue in the next video. We will take a look at how Carlsen beats some younger players.